the cold, the wind, a little bit of snow, but how appropriate that is for tonight's presentation. So it's really great just to have a little bit of snow and feel that festive spirit. I just have a couple of announcements, not too much because we really want to get to the program tonight. I first want to thank everybody for the wonderful job they did at the open house on Sunday for the tree and menorah lighting ceremony. Thank you so much for all the cookies, which we still have tonight, and I'm going to urge you, if you don't want to eat them tonight, please bring them home. Most of them are bagged up, and so please help yourself at the end. We also want to thank all the volunteers who came and stayed, you know, for the 4 or 5 hours we were there, and we had a good turnout through the Pioneer House and the tours. I just want to remind people, we do not have a program in January, so the next one will be in February 6th, and the topic is, sorry about that, sharing our stories, past and present, presented by Dr. Tina Chapman, a professor at the U of R. So that'll be another, I think, very, very good informative program. I would like to do a brief introduction of Mr. David Kuchman, who was instrumental in bringing this program together. He started working on this over a year ago. And we are just so thrilled that he brought this to our attention because, as you will find out, Mr. David Brookins is from Irondequoit, and his dad was so, it was just such a wonderful thing that happened to him and when he was serving in World War II in Belgium, and you'll hear all about that tonight. So David Kuchman, who is a member of the society, he retired from Eastman Kodak Company. He enjoys genealogy. He likes to work on local history, and he actually has done a few programs for us, and they're always very informative. And he also said that he's kind of an aficionado of cars and has always had a lifelong love of cars. So welcome, David. He is going to introduce David Brookins. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody here for the 80th anniversary of the American St. Nick. Project I kind of started a year ago, October. My interest in it came about 6-7 years ago after watching the documentary on WXXI. And as it went, it went along, and then all of a sudden it says, hey, this guy's from Rochester. Made it more interesting. And then about 2/3 of the way in, it showed an envelope. And that envelope had the zip code, 14617. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I grew up in that zip code. Who is this guy? And I went looking, afterwards, and figured I'd find a paragraph or two. I have found dozens and dozens of websites that tell me about this guy. And tonight, I have his son here, David Brookins. He's just returned from Luxembourg, and he's going to tell his adventures. And right now, I'd like to introduce him. Here's David Brookins.
You have my instructions here, just a second. Okay, how about now? Is that all right? Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
And Thanks to the Historical Society for inviting me. This is it's a very, very nice honor, and the timing couldn't have been better because it was 80 years ago today that my dad was the American Saint Nick in Wiltz, Luxembourg. And it's a special day for all of us in the family. I'd first like to introduce my wife, Eileen, who I've been married to for 52 years. And we have 2 children, 3 grandchildren. And Eileen actually taught in Irondequoit. She taught at South Lawn School for 19 years. So I don't see any students here, but myself, I grew up in Irondequoit. I lived from the age of 5 till I went in the Marine Corps at 20. I lived on Cinnabar Road. And we moved back here after we were married for a few years. We moved to Thorndike Road and also to Rosemont Circle, which is off of Longacre, and raised our kids here. And then I retired and we moved to Webster, and Eileen retired and we're still in Webster. So, the only thing I'd ask is I've got a lot of things to cover. Eileen keeps asking me how long is it going to go tonight. I said, it depends, I don't know. So if you could hold your questions till the end, we'll try to get through it so there's time to do that. It's quite a story, and it's a long story. Excuse me just a minute. How many have either read this book or seen this documentary? Okay, so you'll check me if I make a mistake. But that's great. I'm glad you've seen it, and I'm glad you still want to hear more about it. And we've got a little bit more to share, so that's great. So the main character in this story is my dad. And as he was fond of saying, this is like a fairy tale. It has a beginning, a middle, but this one has no end. And that has been true for the last 50 years. It's just astounding. Every year or every trip to Luxembourg, something new comes up. Some new people discover the story. They do something different in Luxembourg to honor these young soldiers from so long ago. And it's just a real special feeling. But the whole story it covers the gamut. It's a real human story. It's got tyranny and brutality, heroism, liberation, kindness, and gratitude. So there's something for everyone in here. Now, this is a new computer for me, so let's see. There he is. That's one of my favorite pictures of my dad. I took that. He was born I took that on his 91st birthday. And honestly, the thing that always bothered me about my dad is the older he got, the better looking he got. And it's just amazing. But he was born February 25th, 1922 in Rochester. His parents were Charles and Norma Brookins. He grew up in the 19th Ward and went to 44 School and West High School. And he graduated from West in 1939 in December. This is a younger crowd, so you probably don't realize, but when the war was starting, the high schools offered a half-year program for seniors in case Uncle Sam came knocking. So he took advantage of that. He had some extra credits, so he graduated in January. It mostly graduated in December, so in January he could start working. He went to work for Ritter Dental. He actually lived in Irondequoit from 1950 to 1985. And he passed away on October 11th, 2018 in Irondequoit at Sunset House on St. Paul Boulevard. So he came full circle. He was 96. Now, I'm gonna go away from him for a few minutes because I've got to set up some context and some background for you. And it starts with Luxembourg. No, it's not Belgium. No, it's not Germany. It's Luxembourg. Now, it's not very big. It's about 73% of the area of Monroe County.
Wow.
And it has about 85% of the population of Monroe County. In the city of Wiltz, did we have a pointer?
I can get you one.
Okay, thank you. The city of Wiltz, which is in the northern 2/3 of the country, there in the middle. The population of Wiltz is about, in 2023, was 7,900 people. Just in comparison, the village of Webster has 5,600 people. So this is a little place, but they're a very, very proud place. Now, in 1940, the German army came blasting through Luxembourg. They were making an end run around the Maginot Line in France. They came through the Ardennes forest, went into Belgium, and then down north to south into France. That worked real well for them, unfortunately. But you can see the lines, they just cut through the middle of the country, and the middle of the country is pine forest and hills and ravines and gullies and very narrow roads. I don't know if I'd try to drive a tank through there, but they did it in 1914, and it worked for them again in 1940, and as you'll see in a little bit, 1944 as well. Okay, now I've got a couple of pictures here that just show what happened when they came through here. There's a recon unit crossing the line. They were on patrol through Luxembourg. And this is kind of what happened. The Grand Duchess, she fled and went into exile in England. The Germans did not come in just to occupy Luxembourg like they did with France and Belgium. They came in to annex Luxembourg. They wanted to wipe away the Luxembourg culture, their economy, their names, their street names, their places. They wanted Luxembourg to become German. The primary language at the time, besides the Luxembourg dialect, was French. That was forbidden. They changed the names of streets. If a street was named after a Luxembourger, it became Hermann Goering Boulevard. All their customs were changed to German customs. None of their holidays were allowed, and that included St. Nicholas Day. And they pretty much shut the place down. And that was in 1940. By 1942, they decided that they would have a compulsory military service, and they conscripted 10,000 Luxembourgers, a third of whom went into hiding. And thank you.
Just press the button with the light on it.
Okay. And that was the bridge too far for the Luxembourgers. The very next day, this was in 30 August, and the 31st of August, 42, the Luxembourgers had a general strike. The schools closed down, the businesses closed down, the dairy farms closed down, the people refused to work. The Germans had a solution to that. They went around and they rounded up everybody of influence and identified the leaders of the strike, and they summarily executed every one of them within 3 days. 21 strikers were executed. 4 of those were from this little village, a little town in Wiltz. They started deporting people. They took whole families, moved them to places that they wanted workers. They moved them to Poland. They moved them to Austria. They moved them wherever they needed extra workers, and they were essentially slave laborers. They didn't forget the Jews. They took 3,700 Jews out of Luxembourg and sent them to concentration camps. So by the end of the war in 1945, 5,700 Luxembourgers died. 2% of their population. It was a brutal, brutal existence. So when these guys showed up, you can imagine the welcome they got. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about Dad's service. This was 21-year-old Dave Brookins in 1943. After high school, I mentioned he went to Ritter Dental. He was actually working on a government contract. They were making steering columns for Lancaster bombers for the RAF. And he worked on those until he got into the service. Now, the real interesting thing was that he was waiting for the draft, and then what he wanted to do was volunteer and pick his branch. He was a real dreamer. He said, well, I wanna go in the Air Corps. So he went down and tried to sign up for the Air Corps. No, they wouldn't take him. So then he went to the Navy. Figured, well, Navy's probably pretty exciting. I'll get to see the world. No, they weren't interested either. Reluctantly, he went to check out the Marines, and they laughed. He had one big issue. He was legally blind in one eye. He had amblyopia when he was a child. He didn't follow the doctor's prescriptions of, covering one eye and correcting the other one. He just couldn't do that. So he ended up, by the time he was 8 years old, he couldn't really see out of that or get information to his brain from that left eye. But he didn't see that as a handicap. He wanted to be like everybody else. He didn't want to be different. And so the Army, I guess, finally, after he pestered them, they said, okay, we'll take you in for non-combat service, and we'll make sure that you get a good job in the Army, but you probably won't go overseas. And he said, fine, I'll take it. I just want to do my part. But then he was a little bit surprised when he got his orders. He was assigned to the 28th Infantry Division. Happens in the Army sometimes, right, Dick? So he said, okay, well, maybe they'll give me a desk job or something. So he went, to basic training. He actually went to Fort Niagara, and then they sent them down from there to Camp Livingston in Louisiana. And he was trained as a radio operator and a cryptographer, receiving coded messages, and also as a projectionist. It was within this signal company responsibility, and they also had to show training films and things like that. But then the other interesting thing was that the 28th Division was training as an amphibious assault infantry division. Still no mention of his handicap. Next thing he knows, he's on a boat to England, and he's in Wales with one good eye, getting ready to invade Europe. This is what it looked like in the south of England on the 5th of June, 1944. And imagine you could hear nothing but trucks and hear boots on the ground, and everything was moving south to head across to this place, Omaha Beach. The 28th Division was initially projected to go in that first wave on Omaha Beach, but they decided they needed a diversionary division to fool the Germans into thinking they were going to invade in Calais as opposed to Normandy. So they said, well, the 28th is an amphibious division. The Germans will think, okay, we're moving an amphibious division up north. They'll tie them up north so that Normandy becomes open. And then to top it all off, just to make sure the Germans were paying attention, they assigned George Patton to that division. So my dad was under Patton for about 3 weeks, but it worked. The Germans were tied up in Calais and we came into Normandy. So this was Normandy in June. In July, the 28th finally came ashore. And they came in to participate in the Saint-Lô offensive. And they spent a good 3 to 4 weeks going hedgerow to hedgerow until they finally broke out and at Saint-Lô and started moving very quickly northeast through France. And they got to liberate Paris. That's the 28th Division. You may have seen this picture. It's a fairly common picture. Every once in a while World War II shows up, but that's the 28th Division, the Pennsylvania National Guard, coming down the Champs-Élysées. They moved them through Paris and then right out the other side and up toward Luxembourg. Now, Luxembourg was liberated on the 10th of September, and they were quite surprised when they got there that there wasn't the wreckage that there was in France. As the army moved through France, the Germans defended town after town after town, and so we pulverized town after town after town. But we got to Luxembourg, and the Germans had decided not to defend it. They moved back into Germany. And so when the army arrived, the towns were still in pretty good shape. And some of them were quite attractive. And they were like little fairy tale European towns. In fact, they got to Wiltz. It still had a castle, very nice little castle that was they're from the 1500s. But they were in that area in Wiltz, in Luxembourg for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then they got orders to go and assault into the Hurtgen Forest, which was in northern Belgium, facing the Ruhr Valley in Germany. And they got stuck in the Hurtgen Forest, and it was awful. It looked like this with a lot of very closely planted trees, artillery coming in at treetop level, exploding at treetop level, and then turning the trees into projectiles. And it went division after division after division went in there, and they couldn't get out of that forest. The 28th got decimated. They suffered casualties, 248 officers and 5,400 enlisted men. And finally, they pulled them out of there, and they were decimated, they were exhausted, they needed to be refitted, resupplied, replacements. And the 8th Division, which was in Luxembourg, moved up and replaced them. 28th came back into Luxembourg, where they had time to rest, recover. They even were billeted in local homes. They got a chance to start talking to the local residents. They learned a little bit more about the culture, and they realized that they were very welcomed in this little town. And here's the guy that got it started. Corporal Harry Stutz. He's a good friend of my dad's. He was about 5 years older than Dad. He'd already been to college. He was a Chicago boy and pretty wise about the ways of the world. And he was a born salesman, an entrepreneur, and he just went around Wiltz trying to learn everything he could about Luxembourg. And he spoke a little French, so that helped a lot, and he got to know some people. He got to know Martin Schneider and Martin's daughter, Martha. And Martin was just thrilled that they'd finally been liberated, the Americans were here, the Germans were gone. They're a little tight on food, but they were really happy. You know, only one little thing that and Martin mentioned was that St. Nicholas Day was coming, and that was a big day for the children, the 6th of December. And they had nothing for the children. And Harry said, well, tell me more about St. Nicholas. Harry was a nice Jewish boy from Chicago. He didn't know anything about St. Nicholas, but he was hoping to learn. And so Martin explained how St. Nicholas comes and brings small gifts and treats for the kids, leaves them sometimes in their shoes or sometimes just outside the house. But St. Nicholas comes, and that's the day for the children. Christmas Day is more of a religious holiday, you know, a family day, you go to church and that, but the kids' day was December 6th. Harry picked up on this real quick, and he said, I think there's something we can do about this. So he went around and started the organization of this little party. We're gonna put on a little Christmas party for the kids. And he wanted to collect whatever the guys had in their rations, from candy and gum. He talked to the cooks, to the bakers. They could do some things. He went and introduced himself to the local priest. Tell me about St. Nicholas. What does he do? How does this work? He went to the convent, the girls' school. He arranged to have them do little programs. And then he just had one job left that he hadn't assigned. He was looking for a lanky guy who owed him some favors, and he would fit into the priest's vestments. And so he went and approached Dick Brookins and said, I've got this job for you and I really need your help, and you really get me out of a bind. And he said, what do I have to do? I said, I want you to dress up like a priest and go around and talk to the children. He said, no way. I'm not gonna do that. He said, I don't know St. Nicholas that well. I don't know what he does. I don't want to screw it up. I don't want to ruin it for the kids. It's not for me. Well, Harry worked on him and he worked on him, and finally he got him to agree. And my dad always said, well, he was a friend and he needed some help, so I said, okay, I'll try it. And he said, great, now once you go up to the convent, the nuns are ready for you, and they got the costumes, they got the priest vestments for you, and they'll dress you up. And they did. They dressed him up in the priest vestments, and they had created a beard, and they made it out of frayed hemp, of old rope. And Dad said it was the scratchiest, awfulest thing he ever wore in his life. And then they had the bishop's mitre to put on his head, and the bishop's head was about 2 sizes too small, so the nuns just crammed it down on his head, and it gave him a headache, and he still talked about that for years. But he said, okay, I'm gonna do it for my friend, and as he got into it, it got just a little easier, a little easier. They even made up an invitation, and it says, 28 Signal Company Message Center Section is happy to have the children of Wiltz, Luxembourg as their guests for our Santa Claus party on Tuesday, December 5th, 80 years ago today, in the large room of the pensionnat from 6 to 8 p.m. And the pensionnat was a large room in the castle that they used for meetings and gatherings of sort. But here they are, and Here's my little pointer. There's Harry Stutz, with little Martha. And there's my dad, 22-year-old St. Nicholas. And all the boys and girls and the women and no men. All the men were conscripted or hiding in the forest. So then we got lucky. We got lucky because there was a combat film crew from the signal company that was out filming a bombing run. And they were coming back to Wiltz after shooting for the day. And they pulled up to an intersection and stopped, and a Jeep went by with Santa Claus in the back. And what the heck was that? Let's go find out. So they followed it, and they drove into the castle, and they found this party going on, and kids putting on skits, and a guy walking around dressed as St. Nicholas. And they looked, and they said, we've got some film left, let's shoot it, and we'll send it in, we'll see what happens. But they shot up the rest of their film, and this is what we got, and 30 seconds one way or the other, we would have never seen this. Whoop. How do I go back? Greg? It shouldn't have jumped that far, okay. I must have hit it too hard. This is a black and white, 16mm signal company film, no sound, but this is what happened that day. And we are so blessed. The film was discovered by a Luxembourger, actually, doing some research with the Library of Congress. And he found it and he got a print. And they still have it in Luxembourg. And the quality of this film and the history that's here is just astounding. We're so lucky to have it. But this was the day. And surprisingly enough, it had stopped raining. Because Luxembourg this time of year is wait 5 minutes and something changes. Here come the little, those are all Luxembourg flags. They're doing a little patriotic ceremony. I don't know if any of you folks went to a Catholic school, but those nuns, boy, they got them in order, really. I know that little girl in the background. That little girl that was being held by her mom, she's a friend of ours in Luxembourg. And I wish I could hear them, what they're singing, but they're just precious.
Are there boys there?
They're little boys. There are little boys there. You can see some of them there.
Oh, I see some now.
So, yeah. But mostly just moms and children. And that's Hank Fiebig. And I apologize, I don't remember where town he came from. But Dad said he knew 2 songs, Jingle Bells and White Christmas. And he played it over and over and over. Would you have me that water? Thank you. There's the contents of their K rations and Red Cross packages, and there's the homemade donuts. Well, what do I do with these? But you can imagine, after what they've gone through for 4 years, and then this happens.
Did your dad see this film?
Oh, he's seen it many times. One year we went back and he invited some of these girls to lunch, and it was just the tears just flowed. He handed out the Christmas packages to them. One little girl told him that she got a Hershey bar on this day, and she took it home, and she was going to save it. She put it in her closet, and during the Battle of the Bulge, the Germans came back, and when she came back to her home about two months later, it was gone. So he made a point of getting her a couple of Hershey bars. Those paper bags, they look like this now. This is what the kids get. There's a 22-year-old Santa Claus that just took his coat off. So just 10 days later, not that one. I just want to advance it one. Thank you. 10 days later, where's my presentation format?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you. 10 days later, this happened. The Germans surprised everybody and started pushing through Luxembourg and Belgium, trying to get to Antwerp, split the Allies, and maybe force a peace talks. So on the early in the morning, the 16th of December, they came through a little town called Clairvaux. The 28th Division had their 110th and 112th regiments in Clairvaux, and they took the brunt of the attack of 4 Panzer divisions. And they fought like tigers and held them back. And the 28th suffered 80% casualties through this battle, but they held up the German timetable by more than a week, in some places 2 weeks. And they did everything they could, and they were told to hold at all costs, and that's what they did. Clairvaux was ground zero for that attack. Guess who happened to be in Clairvaux at the time? The American Saint Nick. He, like I said, he had been a cryptographer and a radio operator, but he also, part of his job was being a projectionist. And Clairvaux at the time was an R&R center. Guys would come off the line, they'd get a shower, they'd get some clean clothes, they'd get a couple of hot meals, they'd spend 2 or 3 days just trying to recover a little bit and before going back on the line. And so they had entertainment there for them, and what they did was have the projectionists show Hollywood movies. So on the afternoon of the 15th, Dad went down to Clairvaux with his 2 projectors and Bing Crosby and going my way. And that's what he was gonna do until he was told otherwise. So he checked into the hotel. He found a young guy in there as a roommate. The guy was a replacement. He hadn't even been issued a weapon. And all Dad had was his carbine. And in the middle of the night, the artillery started landing, and he was getting mortars and artillery rounds coming down right into the town. And Clairvaux sits in a little bowl next to a river, and the high ground was above them, and they were just getting hammered. They ran out of their room. They went, reported to regiment. The first job they got was to try to take children out of a school and move them to the safety of the hotel basement. And they'd run over to the school between the rounds dropping in, grab a couple of kids, run them into the hotel, go back and get a couple more kids. And the last time he came by with 2 kids, he ran across an open street, and a German machine gun opened up right behind him. And it was a message: don't come back this way. So they didn't. So he was able to get as many of the kids as possible into this hotel basement. Then he went back to regiment, and they had him running messages from different positions around the town. And sooner or later, things started to get out of hand, and he'd run a message to a certain outpost, and outpost was overrun. He'd come back. The regiment was collapsing into the castle, and they were burning documents. They were setting off thermite grenades to destroy secret equipment. And the colonel said, if you want to get back to your unit in Wiltz, you're on your own. So they said they would try that, and his friend Hugh, his new friend Hugh, stuck with him, and he says, I don't have a weapon, you seem to know what you're doing, I'm going with you. So they worked their way through town. He came around a corner. They encountered a 2-man German machine gun crew just about setting up a machine gun that was going to cover a couple of streets that they had to go down. And he figured, if I don't get out of here, I'm going to be a prisoner of war. I'm going to get killed. I've got to do something. He dropped those 2 guys, and he didn't know really if he killed them or not, but he put them out of commission so that they could run out. And they got to the edge of town and started moving up a road toward Wiltz. And down the road comes a big 6x or a big army truck. They stopped it. They said, you don't want to go down to Clairvaux. They're being overrun. And we want to get back to Wiltz. And the driver was more than happy to turn around and take them back to Wiltz. They hopped in the back of the truck. It was clean laundry for the R&R camp. And he got back to Wiltz, reported into his headquarters, told them what he could tell them. And they said, great, we appreciate the information. Now I want you out on that listening post on the other side of the castle tonight. And that's where he spent the night out there, scared to death. But he survived that. The Wiltz was about to be overrun. They moved the headquarters unit from Wiltz, including him with his Sagaba machines or his coating machines, and they moved it back into Belgium in the town of Sabray. But because the 28th Division had held off that attack for as long as they did, the 101st Airborne was able to get into Bastogne and defend Bastogne. And they became famous for being the defenders of Bastogne, but they wouldn't have been able to do that without the 28th Division. So that was his real test in combat, but only 10 days after being St. Nicholas. So the 28th evacuated for Sabray. They never did come back to Wiltz. They got reassigned to southern France. The 26th and 90th divisions came back to retake Wiltz, and in doing so, they had to destroy about 80% of the town. And a lot of those little kids that were in the party were killed during that battle. But even with that, Luxembourgers never forgot the fact that these guys came 3,000 miles to liberate them from that German oppression. And yeah, it cost them a lot of lives and it cost some of their towns, but they're still memorials to this day all over Luxembourg. Some to units like this is the 28th Memorial in Wiltz, others to individual soldiers. Some little crossroads will have a little monument. 2 guys were killed there, 2 Americans were killed there, and they have a little stone commemorating that. It's just a very remarkable place. This is the National Liberation Memorial just outside of Wiltz. It's where they have ceremonies every year for the Battle of the Bulge. It's dedicated to the Allies. The monument is built in the shape of a ruins to reflect the damage during the war. But they have major ceremonies there every year. And this is the American Cemetery in Luxembourg, just outside the airport. And this is the grave of Eddie Stein, close friend of my dad's, who stayed behind in Wiltz to help with the rear guard action, to allow the headquarters staff to get out of Wiltz. And every year my dad went back to Luxembourg, he made a point of stopping to see Eddie's grave. And my wife and I have carried that on. And we were there Monday this week. And right next to Eddie is his brother Charles. And Charles was killed in Normandy at the end of July. And the brothers are buried together. And in this cemetery in Luxembourg, there are 22 sets of brothers. And it's quite the sight, and it's humbling and very solemn. 5 years ago when we were there, it looked like that, and I thought it was beautiful. Just a little bit of snow, a wreath on every grave. So I took a picture of that. And we were there just Monday, and it's still beautiful. It's 5,000 American boys are in that cemetery, and that's one of the smaller ones in Europe. If the story were to end, that's where the story would probably end. It could have. It could have ended right there, and it still would have been a pretty good story. But this one has no end. And there's a little bit more to this. And there are a couple of people that are really important to this story. Here's one. This is Frank McClellan. He became a good friend of Dad's in the last few years of their lives. Frank, big, rough, tough guy from Pittsburgh. Big, rough, tough marshmallow of a guy from Pittsburgh. He was an MP sergeant. He was an MP sergeant because when he went in, they rounded up all the guys that were 6'2" or above and 200 pounds, and they made them MPs. Can you imagine why? So he became an MP, and he had a really, really tough time. He had been in Wiltz. He didn't know my dad. He didn't get invited to the party. He didn't know my dad, but he was at Wiltz, and he was in that that group that was fighting the rear guard action. And he was leading an MP platoon, and he had a bunch of other people with him, and he was forming a convoy to get out of Wiltz and get to Bastogne, and they got ambushed just outside of town, and they were all captured. And they were pretty much marched to Poland. It was just an awful experience, and I can give you a reference to Frank's story after the presentation tonight. He's a wonderful man. We got to know him very, very well. But he became very important to Wiltz, because he had been visiting over the last several years after his wife died. He had struggled with a lot of PTSD. We didn't know what it was then, but he survived prisoner of war camp. He came home. The Veterans Administration treated him horribly, and he just had a rough life. But he always worried that he had made the wrong decision on leading that column into that ambush. So he went back on his own and retraced his steps, and satisfied finally in his mind that there wasn't anything he could have done. It just the way it worked out. And so while he was visiting the town, he went in and had dinner at a hotel, and the lady that owned the hotel asked if he was American, and he said, yeah. And she said, were you here during the war? And he said, I was with the 28th Division. She said, there are two gentlemen who would like to talk to you. They want to talk to all the veterans. Okay. So they came over and they introduced themselves, and they got to know Frank. And one of those persons was Jean Schweig, or Jean Schweig. His nickname was Jean-Lee. He was a Luxembourger. He had been a 17-year-old boy during that Christmas party. And he had never forgotten that. And he said that we should always remember what those Americans did for us. And when they started building their town back up and recovering all the damage from the war, they started up their traditions again. And in 1947, they had St. Nicholas Day, but from then on, it was going to be the American St. Nicholas. And for 30 years, they celebrated that party that the GIs put on for the kids, unbeknownst to anybody here. And he got to know Frank. Frank had made a couple of trips back and forth, and they became friends. But as the 30th anniversary in 1977, the 30th anniversary of rebuilding their town was coming up, Gene wanted to have something special. And he called Frank and he says, I've got a job for you. I want you to find this man. And Frank said, how am I going to find him? I don't even know who he is. I don't know. He may not have survived the war. But no, his name is Richard Brookins. They knew that because there was a Stars and Stripes article that they had gotten this picture from the film that was taken. And they identified him as Corporal Richard Brookins, Rochester, New York. And it hit all the newspapers. In fact, my grandmother started receiving clippings from people from all over the country, mothers from all over the country. We found your son's in a paper, here's a clipping. And so they knew his name, they knew Rochester, New York, but that's all they knew. But I want you to find him. So Frank said, okay, I'll try to find him. And he went home. And he didn't really know where to start, but he did know that he had a friend who had been in the 28th in his Legion post. His name was Dave Kelly. And so he went to Dave Kelly and he says, I know you work for the phone company, and I know the phone company has all these fancy books and stuff. You can look up people. And he said, yeah, what do you want to do? And I got this guy, Richard Brookins. I go, oh, Brookins, I know him. He was my outfit. And he said, I can't believe it. Really? And he said, yeah, and he's in Rochester, I can find him. So he got to the phone book, made a phone call, checked, yep, that was him. Frank got on the phone, talked to him for a little while and said, you're gonna receive a letter. You're not gonna believe it, but you're gonna receive a letter. So the letter comes. August 1977, and it's about 6 pages like this. And Jing Shuai is explaining who he is, what he does, what's going on in Wiltz, all of the things and he says, I want this to be a special party. I want you to come and be St. Nicholas again. Please come and be St. Nicholas again. And my dad said, oh my God. He'd almost forgotten about this thing. It was one afternoon during the war. But he thought about it and he said, you know, these people are real serious and I think I owe it to them. Well, little did the people in Luxembourg know they picked the right guy. It could have been anybody. It could have been a guy who said, I don't want anyone to talk about the war. I don't want to hear anything about it. I'm not involved. I'm not your guy. It could have been somebody who died. It could have been somebody who was wounded. But it was this guy who recognized the significance of it to those people. And it was important to them. It was important to him. And it was important to the guys that he served with, that they get some recognition for what they did. And so he said, fine, let's do this. And at the time, there were 4 of us, my 2 brothers and my sister, and 2 wives, Eileen and my brother Terry's wife, Candy. And Dad said, you know, I can go over and do this, but I don't know how I can explain it to you when I come back. So how about if we all go? My grandfather had recently passed away and left a little bit of money. Not a lot, but a little bit of money. So he took all of us to Wiltz in December 1977. And it was the most amazing trip. And now, Greg's gonna help me with this one, because this is a little tricky. But in 1977, an NBC crew from London was assigned to Wiltz because they heard about this party. He has to test it with another one. You can't get there from here. You know.
The little town of Wiltz in Luxembourg, 1,000 years old, occupied by the Germans in World War II, set free by the U.S. Army's 28th Division in 1944 in early December. The American soldiers that year put on a Christmas party for the town's children, a party they still remember in Wiltz. Fred Briggs in Wiltz, Luxembourg, tells the rest of it.
To see it now, Wiltz seems to be the sort of village that hasn't been often disturbed in its 10 centuries of existence. But in 1944, when the Allied forces were pushing toward the Rhine, more than half of the town was in ruins. The Nazi occupation had gone on 4 years. Then, early in December, Wiltz was liberated by the U.S. Army's 28th Division. A group of GIs from the 28th Signal Company took it upon themselves to stage a Christmas celebration for the children here. One of them, Private Richard Brookins, dressed up as St. Nicholas. Since 1947, when the village was completely restored, the townspeople have reenacted that visit from St. Nicholas every December 4th, Liberation Day. Only this year, they decided to do it with the original cast. After a year-long search, they found Richard Brookins in Rochester, New York, a telephone company executive. Brookins and his family were brought to Wiltz. So were 7 other members of his old company. Brookins had almost forgotten about it in the intervening 33 years, but one look at Wiltz brought it all back.
Really, it was kind of like Christmas for us, too, and we wanted to get involved in this, and it just grabbed a hold of everybody, and we thought it was a heck of an idea. And I think we were getting as much out of it as we expected that the kids would.
This year he was St. Nicholas again, only this time a helicopter brought him instead of a jeep. A parade through the village. Candy for the 1,500 children lining the streets. A village that flies the American flag alongside Luxembourg's. All in all, a rather amazing day for everyone here, including Brookins' daughter and his 3 sons. He never told them much about his old Army days.
Sorry about the quality.
It's I'm not sure what the nature of the problem is, but we'll get through it.
All in all, a rather amazing day for everyone here, including Brookins' daughter and his 3 sons. He never told them much about his old Army days, so inevitably there was always the question, what did you do in the war, Daddy? On this day, they found out. Fred Briggs, NBC News, Luxembourg.
From Washington, thank you and good night.
And from New York, until tomorrow, good night
Who are
for
those
NBC.
One little thing about this, Gene Schweig, I told you he was a real operator and a real organizer. He had the guts to go over to the U.S. Army base in Bitburg, Germany, and convince a colonel to loan him a helicopter and a crew. Because he thought it's 1977. We're not gonna bring him in a Jeep, we're gonna bring him in a helicopter. They sent a crew and a Huey helicopter for the weekend to fly my dad around and land in the middle of town. We met the crew Friday night in the little hotel bar, and you should have seen the smiles on these guys' faces. You know, the 22-year-old, 23-year-old pilot, co-pilot, and a crew chief. And they were having the time of their life, and they didn't have to buy a single drink. And it was just fantastic. And so Gene Schweig, he probably, if he lived in the States, he would have been a senator or something like that. Okay, now let me see where I was. So we went in 77 with my brothers and sisters and our wives, and also Harry Stutz, Frank McClellan, and a lot of other 28th Division veterans came along too. So it was just a magical time in the town. They couldn't do enough for us, and we just had a terrific time. One of the funny things we did, we took over this small little boutique hotel, and back in the 70s, I don't know if you remember, everybody had really long hair, and everybody had hair dryers. Well, we went into this hotel that was built in the 1920s, and we blew the circuits on our hair dryers. They were scrambling for a whole night trying to get us hair dryers. But it was just a wonderful, wonderful time. My dad made 8 more visits to Wiltz over the years. He in 81, he took a couple of busloads of GI veterans on a tour of the battlefields. Did that in September, and then he did St. Nicholas again in 84, and then in 94, he had the same idea. We can't come back and try to explain this to the kids, so let's take everybody. So he took all the grandchildren, and 19 of us went, and we took over this whole hotel. And it was just fantastic. It was the greatest experience of our kids' lives. They got to go down, they got to walk down the street and meet people who lived through that German occupation. And the people would come up to them and grab them by their cheeks and say, you must listen, you must hear the stories. It was very bad here, but your father came and his friends came and we're free now. My kids never looked at a history lesson the same way again. It was so real, so personal, and that the value of that big trip was immeasurable. It was just terrific. In 2004, this was the last time he actually played St. Nicholas. He was 82. This is a tough job. It starts early in the morning. You have a mass, and then you go and you get dressed up for the parade, and then you hand out these packages to 1,500 kids that come through. And then from there, you march up to the senior home, and you pass out packages to the seniors, and then from there, you march to the hospital, and you visit everybody in the hospital. So it's a young man's job, and it was really wearing on him. So that was the last one. In 2009, they dedicated a stone in front of the castle to him, and it's in Luxembourgish in English, and it says, "To Richard Brookins, the American GI of the 28th Infantry Division, honorary citizen of Wiltz, honorary member of the Overay St. Nicholas," which is the St. Nicholas Society, "St. Nick for the children of our town in December 1944. And that year, he was a Grand Marshal in the parade. He still got to ride in the Jeep with some reenactors. Europe has thousands of people that are World War II reenactors, and they are amazing. They have all the uniforms, the equipment, they create their own if they can't buy it. They maintain these Jeeps. They've got 6x and personnel carriers that from 1942 Dodges they meticulously maintain. In this last parade this week, we had 30 original U.S. Army vehicles in the parade. Let's see. And then in 2014, it was his last trip over there, and it was a tough trip. He was on full-time oxygen at this time, and they dedicated this statue to him. And if you look and see that this is not just St. Nicholas, it's Dick Brookins. He's got his wide sunglasses, or his wide glasses, and he's carrying a helmet. And it's this is dedicated to him, and they put this as a wood carving, and they put it up at Christmas time every year in front of the castle. And that's what it looks like today. And in 2016, he received the Honor Medal for Military Merit from the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. And there's not a lot of these given out. There have been, but some of the recipients are Winston Churchill, Dwight Eisenhower, Charles de Gaulle, and Dick Brookins. And in October 11th, 2018, Dad passed away in Irondequoit, and the Society of St. Nicholas just sent this picture. They didn't send any words or anything. They just, all of a sudden, I get an email, and there's this picture. And it couldn't have been better. It was just very, very moving. Also in 2015, I forgot to mention, the World War II Foundation premiered that documentary. And we went over to see that. It was premiered in Luxembourg. And that was, I think, I can't do it in an hour, but he did it in much better time. In 2019, we took some family members with us, and I took my 2 grandchildren. And they were suitably impressed, and people were impressed with them. And they learned their history lessons, and they went back to their schools in Indiana and put on a St. Nicholas presentation for each of their classrooms. my daughter got a call from a teacher. She says, "Who's Bumpa? And what's this about St. Nicholas?" And she says, "Oh, does he want to make a presentation?" "Yeah, I think he does." "Okay, well, I'll come in and we'll talk about it." So my grandson Miles did a super job, and he said, this is what it's like. And also at that time, the town put up these remember signs, and they're all over town, and they're where significant events happened. And this one's in front of the castle where Dad's statue is, and it talks about the St. Nicholas party, and it's in 3 languages, English, French, and German. And there's a picture of Harry Stutz on there and Dad in a Jeep, but it talks about what happened here and why. And if you go down the street a little ways, there's the house where the General Coda's headquarters was in 1944, and there's a sign like this, and it explains that. There's another sign to the other side of the castle that talks about the people who defended Wiltz in the rearguard action, and there's a picture of Frank McClellan that was taken when he was captured as a POW. So there's a story about that, but they do a wonderful job of trying to keep these memories alive. In 2019, you remember the Sunday picture with all the kids next to the statue? Well, that was Saturday. Sunday it was snowing. And this was the parade down the main street in the snowstorm. But the parade went on. But it's one of my favorite pictures. It just shows you the involvement of the people, and it's got the band and everybody, and it's just a great event. And then this year, something new, story never ends. We had 2 stamps dedicated, 2 stamps issued and commemorating the St. Nick party. This was a postcard, a canceled postcard, and I brought some stamps to our stamp collector here, and he can show you afterwards if you'd like to see them. But and we met the guy, the artist that drew this painting, made this painting. We met him for dinner on Sunday night, and he was wonderful and just thrilled to be at dinner with us. And then we got to meet the U.S. ambassador on Sunday at the castle, and we had the wreath laying. I'll show you that in a second. But he's very nice guys from Minnesota, and Eileen grabbed him to take our picture by the statue, and so we could make a Christmas card. Really, really nice guy. And this was the wreath laying, and as I mentioned, it occurs every Sunday, every St. Nicholas Sunday at 10 o'clock. And we have a moment of silence in front of the memorial to the 28th Division. We have a drummer and a bugler plays Luxembourg version of taps, and it's very, very moving. And this was the parade this past Sunday. Just a couple of pictures of that. St. Nick in the Jeep and his angels. Instead of halos, they're wearing nice little earmuffs. They're really cute. And they always drive through the portal of the castle in the same spot that Dad did in 1944. And the photographers, you can't see them, but they're swarming around. Everybody wants that same iconic picture, and it means so much. And they always put that in the papers in Luxembourg and in the areas in Belgium around there. They have the black and white one, and then they have this year's version. And there's a good close-up of Mr. Leon Paquet, who is the stand-in for the American St. Nick. And that's it. And I just want to comment, for more information, 2 websites here that are just outstanding. One is called The Warrior Next Door. It's a podcast. There's some incredible stories. Ours is one. Frank McClellan's is one. And there are about 200 other veteran stories that they do in this podcast. Highly recommend it. Those 2 guys that run the podcast, they came to Luxembourg with us this time, and they were blown away. And you go on their website, you may see some things that they'll put up from their trip to Luxembourg. The other is the World War II Foundation. That's the outfit that produces the documentaries. And they have done over 30 documentaries on individual veterans or units, and their documentaries are absolutely outstanding. They give them free to public television stations, and it just depends on the station which ones buy and so forth. But they have a tremendous website. They have a museum in Rhode Island, and I highly recommend it. And as a matter of fact, now they have a streaming channel where you can watch all these videos for free, all these documentaries for free. So with that, you can shut it off. Oh, excuse me.
A little bit more yet.
Well, Dave wants to add something.
All right. Thank you, David. Right now, I'd like to introduce another David. David Long, Monroe County legislator.
David.
All the Daves. Good name. So I represent this part of Irondequoit. I live around the corner from where you used to, around Cinnabar. I have 3 kids, and tonight after work, I went home and had dinner, and my kids are like, "What are you doing tonight after we eat?" And I said, "I'm going to talk about the American St. Nick," and they're like, "What's that?" And we talked about the St. Nicholas parties they had at St. Catherine when they were in preschool. And we talked about war. We talked about what would it be like to have someone occupying your country and telling you what you can and can't do. And it was a powerful discussion. And we talked about how awesome it was that your dad came and what joy he brought them that day. So I just want to say thank you. I have a proclamation from the county to read and to present to you, please. Let me just read it because I'm kind of choked up. This is, I'm so thrilled that you have these memories of your dad to be able to share with us. I put my glasses on. All right, so it says, proclamation. Whereas longtime resident of Irondequoit, Corporal Richard Brookins, demonstrated extraordinary compassion and heroism during the dark days of World War II, embodying the spirit of St. Nicholas, Brookins delivered candy to the children of Wiltz, Luxembourg, on December 5th, 1944. And whereas, for the last 80 years, the selfless act of kindness displayed by Corporal Brookins has been annually commemorated by the town of Wiltz, a statue and memorial were unveiled in the Wiltz Town Square, and it was named in his honor. Whereas, as a further extension of their gratitude, the nation of Luxembourg awarded Corporal Brookins the Military Medal, its highest service decoration, in 2016. This honor serves as an enduring testament to the impact of his kindness during times of war. And whereas, an instrumental founder in the local chapter of the Veterans of the Battle of the Bulge, Corporal Brookins recognized the importance of preserving the memory and legacy of those who served in this historic campaign, its 80th anniversary occurring December 2024. And whereas all of Monroe County recognizes the importance of preserving the legacy of individuals like Richard Brookins, whose story inspires future generations, like my kids, with the values of kindness, bravery, and community service. Now, therefore, I, Dave Long, Monroe County Legislator, and Adam Bello, Monroe County Executive, do hereby proclaim December 5th, 2024 to be a day to honor Corporal Richard Brookins, the American St. Nick. Adam Bello, another thing, just thank you. Thanks for sharing with us. Thank you very much. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure.
You done now?
No, no, a little bit more.
Questions and answers, we maybe have time.
Yeah,
10
I just got one
minutes.
little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions or that I can help with? Well, come on, I didn't do that much.
I just want to say that I had the privilege of riding the bus with your father on the way home from 75 to 80.
Well, thank you very much.
Right?
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you.
And he never told me anything about that. He was.
And he was a West High graduate?
West High, class of
That's where
39.
we went.
There. Yes, sir.
So we were actually, I'm Rich Maltz, we were actually in 2 years ago, this December.
Oh.
And my grandfather was from Luxembourg. So we went over there to present our paperwork to the burgomaster to get our citizenship. And we did go to Wiltz, Clairvaux, we went to spend a lot of time in north of Luxembourg. And I actually worked at the treatment plant in the lab with Candace.
Oh, did you really?
I still remember the day that she came in and said, "You won't believe this, but these people from Luxembourg called my father-in-law, and said, we want you to come to Luxembourg."
Yeah.
So I actually was there, like, right at the beginning of them finding your dad.
Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. And that is a beautiful place, isn't it, Wiltz in Clairvaux? One little side story of that's really remarkable is, my brother Terry was working at KEKA in Pittsburgh. And he wanted to, we got invited to go to back again in '94, and he wanted someone to fill in for him at the job. He was a director, TV director, and he talked to this friend of his, Peter Lyon, who was another director there, and he says, I have to go to Luxembourg with my family, and Peter Lyon says, it's November. Why would you want to go to Luxembourg now? Well, it's something my dad did in the war. He said, well, you got to tell me more about that. And so he said, well, I'll give you the 10-minute explanation. And so he talked to Peter Lyon for about 10 minutes, and Peter Lyon said, this is amazing. Somebody should write a book about this. Hey, maybe I'll write a book about this. And he did, and he has done more to help promote the story than just about anybody. And sometimes it just works that way. Okay, I guess, thank you very much for coming out on
But I just want to say thank you so much for coming. There was such a beautiful and moving story. I mean, there were tears in my eyes many times, especially after seeing the little children getting their treats and their faces and how they just looked up and how happy and excited they were. So thank you so much for bringing this. As Irondequoit residents, we feel very proud of what your dad did. And I thank you for bringing this story and David for putting this together. Thank you so much.